18th at 1:30 p.m. City Council meeting. At this time, we're going to stand for Pledge of Allegiance and prayer.
Sure.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord God, we come together to this meeting, Father, to give glory and honor to your name, Father. And Lord, we ask that you just help us to be wise in our decisions. And Lord, we give thanks, a special thanks to all these officers that are represented here today, Father.
Yes.
For they are truly peace officers, God. And we just ask, God, that you just bless them and help us, Lord, to bless them also. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. At this time, we will have questions and comments from any citizen that would like to speak. And I see none, so we'll move forward to the citation presentation to members of the Borger Police Department for meritorious service. Chief.
Don't worry, Ms. Mayor, I have an issue with that one too. So. Mrs. Mayor, council members, it is my honor to stand before y'all today to present some awards to some of our officers stemming from an incident that occurred back on the 19th of September, so last month. On the evening of Monday, September 19th, officers with the Borger Police Department were dispatched to a disturbance called in by a child in a residence. Upon the officer's arrival, they attempted contact with the suspect and his victim, who were in a back bedroom of the residence. The suspect then entered the hallway, hiding behind his estranged girlfriend, and without warning, the suspect opened fire on our officers in the hallway, striking Corporal Tolis. Officers then took cover and were able to get the female and child out of the residence to safety. The suspect was then taken into custody behind the residence by other officers. Corporal Tolis was struck by a round that entered his forearm and then went into his lower stomach. Fortunately, his department-issued bullet-resistant vest stopped the round from penetrating into his body. Corporal Tolis was bleeding profusely from the injury to his arm, and Officer Kayla Chapman applied a department-issued tourniquet to stop the bleeding to his arm. Officer Matthew Langwell, who is, I may mention, in his second week of training during this incident, drove Corporal Tolis to the hospital where he could seek immediate treatment. Sergeant Stanford and Officer Wheelis remained on scene, taking the suspect into custody. Shortly after, officers then began arriving on scene and at the hospital, most of them being off duty without even having to be called in. They had heard what had happened and responded as soon as they knew what had occurred and took care of whatever was needed. I was very proud of the professional response by this agency and the officers who are members of it, and how the entire situation was handled by our officers. I know that the professionalism I saw displayed by officers during this time is what is expected by the council, the city administration, myself, and the citizens of our community. It is my distinct honor and privilege now to be able to give the following awards to the officers who were involved in this incident. Corporal Tolis. For his injury during this incident, Corporal Tolis is being given the Purple Heart Award by the department.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Officer Kayla Chapman. Officer Chapman is being given the life-saving award for the measures that she took immediately after the incident to help Corporal Tolis with his injury. Now if I can have Sergeant Stanford, Officer Wheelis, and Officer Langlois. Y'all are being presented with the Notorious Conduct Award due to your actions in the way that you handled the incident, stopping further injury or loss of life to our other citizens, and the way that you handled the situation. We're proud of you all. Now, the other officers that are in the room, go ahead, y'all all just all come up here together. The other officers who are here are being given the Unit Citation Award. All these officers that you see here were not directly involved in the initial incident, however, were there for the response afterwards, from scene security to investigating the incident to making sure that Corporal Tolles and his family was taken care of at the hospital and was able to get to the hospital safely, as well as anything else that was needed during the incident. So all these officers are being presented with the unit citation. Officer Rodriguez. Lieutenant Morris. Detective Ginter. Sergeant Chester. Officer Bliss. Officer Woods. Sergeant Cover. Sergeant Webster. Officer Harmon. Corporal Tucker. Very good. Corporal Cox. Lieutenant Guzman. Officer Baxter. Officer Hunter. Very proud of you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank y'all so much. We appreciate everything y'all do every single day. And Brock, we're glad you're all okay. I'm glad you're back to work. I assume you're back to work, right? Oh, okay. All right. Thank y'all all so much for what y'all did. Thank you, Chief.
I want to echo that sentiment as well. I have had the privilege of shadowing many of the more senior police officers. A lot of y'all were new or newer. And I have been impressed at the quality of Borger's Police Department and its leadership. You can give yourself a pat on the back. Having been in the military, I know what a meritorious unit award is. It's rarely given. It's kind of difficult to earn, and those people on scene responded very well to a very difficult situation, and I'm personally impressed, and our citizens should be as well. Thank you for what you do for this community.
Yes, agreed.
I just want to echo, a couple of you guys had the pleasure of coaching. and it's good to see you in the position you're in, but all your officers. I know on a daily basis, you're putting your life out there on the line just because you're a police officer. I want to thank you for what you do for this city and for yourself and for every citizen within our city limits. And I know sometimes you have a difficult job, but I want to thank each and every last one of you for what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We appreciate you. We really do. And we continue to pray for y'all, each one of you. So at this time, we'll have a proclamation designating November 2022 as Fair Housing Month in Borger. And if y'all are ready to, yeah, we'll let y'all. Thank y'all so much. Bye, guys. It was amazing getting to see that.
It's more exciting now. You sure you don't want to stay in for the rest of it?
Call of Duty.
I could drag down the street.
Yeah.
Okay, so the proclamation designating November 2022 as Fair Housing Month in Borger reads as this: proclamation, whereas Title 8, is that right? Of the Civil Rights Act of 1968 as amended prohibits discrimination in housing and declares it a national policy to provide within constitutional limits for fair housing in the United States. And whereas the principle of fair housing is not only national law and national policy, but a fundamental human concept and entitlement for all Americans. And whereas the National Fair Housing Law during the month of November provides an opportunity for all Americans to recognize that complete success in the goal of equal housing opportunity can only be accomplished with the help and cooperation of all Americans. Now, therefore, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Borger and on behalf of the entire city council, I, Karen Felker, do hereby proclaim November 2022 as Fair Housing Month. Further, I hereby urge all the citizens of Borger to become aware of and support the fair housing law. And now we'll move on to the city manager's report.
So, October's always interesting because, we're in the new fiscal year, so it's kind of, the new year for us, but not quite the new year. So I don't have much to talk about with the new year. I've got a lot to talk about how we ended, but we did get our first sales tax distribution in the new budget year. It was up 17.92%, so up 18% over last year. So we are starting off fiscal 2023 on a pretty positive note. If you remember, we budgeted 4% less than what we actually collected last year in fiscal 2022. So starting off 18% over is a pretty good starting point. So I believe with some of the, if the car is out in front of Shoe Sensation or Bell's Outlet or any indication, along with the forthcoming Tractor Supply and HTO, I think sales tax, we should be in pretty good shape. And of course, as we continue to encourage shopping locally, remember that sales tax increase is a pretty good reason that we were able to lower the tax rate by almost 10 cents, which was about a 16% reduction in your property tax rate. And everybody should have their actual tax bills now, and I don't know about yours, but mine was down just a little bit from last year. So I know that everybody freaked out when they got their appraisals because their appraisals went up significantly, but it looks like, in the city portion and the school district both adopted rates lower than the no new revenue rate, so that savings was passed on to our property tax payers, which actually did reduce in a lower tax bill, which I think mine was about $80 a year less, which isn't a lot, but in a time when it seems like everything is going up double digits, I'll take whatever little savings I can.
Yeah.
So we are starting on a good point there. Also in this consent items in a minute, you're going to see the investment reports, both the fiscal year-end investment report and the quarterly investment report. I wanted to point out just a few things. So all of last year, we earned $161,000 in interest on $24 million in the bank. That was an average of 0.73%. Of that $161,000, we earned 120 of it in the fourth quarter. And so you're seeing that as interest rates go up, but I'm kind of, we do anticipate another interest rate hike probably again later this year, and they have hiked it since the fourth quarter already once. So we do anticipate, I do think interest revenue will be up even higher than what we budgeted going forward. So that is, the nice thing about that, we did take out some debt in the last 2 years, but those are at lower rates now. So we're actually, I think, going to be able to benefit from some of that cheaper rate as we go forward with funding some of our capital projects, while we were able to get it a little cheaper. So as you look forward to that, you might keep in mind when we get our next quarterly report, I'll try to point it out and see what we've gone up to. Tex pool, where most of our money is invested, that fourth quarter, we averaged 1.98% return. It's averaging about 2.9% as of last week. So that should be positive on the revenue side going forward. So when we talk about our year-end results, as I go through this, keep in mind that there are still some end-of-year adjustments that have to be made. So these are unaudited, there's always some last transactions that come in that we settle. But overall, the general fund ended with total revenue of $17,257,885. That's 4% over our budgeted revenue. That's 4% over our amended budgeted revenue, because we actually did amend that. Expenditures were $16,941,612, which is 1% below our budgeted revenue. That leaves about $196,000 what we were under budget on. There's another $229,000 that's still encumbered, and so those are a lot of the POs that we issued for stuff that we haven't gotten in yet. So those will carry over into this budget year, so we'll likely have to amend this budget, and we'll end up going into reserves because we spent that money. We've encumbered it, we just haven't spent it yet, so we'll have to work through that. But when we talk about general fund performance overall, so we budgeted last year a $700,248 deficit, mainly because we planned to pay for the fire engine outright with cash using reserve funds. We increased our sales tax revenue mid-year when we did our mid-year budget, so that budgeted shortfall had been reduced to $312,401. And when we finished the year, we're actually going to end up with a $741,985 surplus in the general fund. So most of that is the $628,643 in revenue that we were over. And so pretty much not only did we pay for that fire truck, but we're going to put some more money back in the bank as well to fund some other capital projects that we've talked about and are on the plan. So when we look at that on a department basis, I wanted to point out just a few things as you go through that report. The accounting department was $24,000 under budget. That's because we didn't pay for an audit, because we're still waiting on an audit. And so because of that, we will have double audit expenses this year. So there again, some of this will go into the bank, and so we've got the money, but when we start spending a little more this year, I just kind of want you to be aware of that. And as we start having, and we've talked about this a lot, as we start having long lead times for a lot of material and stuff like that, we're going to start seeing more multi-year budget projects, and we're in a good place to deal with that. It's just not going to be quite as clean as you're used to seeing on those financial reports.
Is it lead times not getting any better, really?
Not on vehicles and some of the heavier stuff. We did manage to get the trash truck about 362 days after we ordered it.
Wow.
We're still waiting on the pothole patcher, which is been over a year since we ordered that now, which is when we get to the department. But when we get to department reports, I'll talk about that a little bit, but we've been struggling catching up with potholes and some street repairs because the old pothole patcher has been down, and we've been working on it, which we knew, which is why we bought a new one over a year ago, but we don't have that yet, so we're working through that. Code enforcement has an $87,000 surplus. That was mainly due to staffing changes when we lost our code enforcement officer and had to wait for a little bit. We've also didn't do as much asbestos abatement because it's so expensive, we didn't have the budget to do it. The price quote for the building at 5th and Weatherly that we're looking at, just the initial asbestos abatement without demolition was $30,000. And that didn't get all of it. And so we're trying to work through some ways with there, but I do anticipate probably trying to plug some of our reserve funds into some of those to get some of those blighted commercial properties as we have some space to do, so we might talk about that in the
Is that
future.
the apartment?
Yeah, those white stucco
Yeah,
apartments. And the problem with that is it's got to be completely demolished to get to some of the asbestos that's in the footing, so they've got to come in and abate the windows and some of the other things. And that $30,000 was just the abatement.
Wow.
And so that's to get the windows out of the way, but then we still have to come in and tear it down to get to the plumbing underneath that part of that other $30,000 will cover. So in totality, that's probably an $80,000 project to get that building down. But we're working on ways to try to either, it's getting to be expensive, and so that just changes our budget and multi-year process, but we are still trying to work on that. Recreation had a $70,000 surplus. Most of that was tied to savings and part-time staff this year, so we operated a little more efficiently at the swimming pool this summer. Streets had a $33,000 surplus. A lot of that was, again, we were short-staffed for a good portion of the year. The court shows a $155,000 surplus. That's from our salary realignment, doing away with the municipal city marshal's position and moving it into the police department and getting rid of the second administrative assistant position. So, that department now is just the 2 court clerks and the part-time judge. And then our reserve account was $73,000 to the good. That's because we didn't get the roof completed on this building. That's out to bid right now. Will probably be awarded at our next building, so that money has been budgeted in this coming year. And then I did kind of want to point out the biggest department that was over budget was hazard mitigation, which was $176,483 over budget. If you remember, we had that pretty extreme wildfire season early in the year. But I also want to point out the revenue and the contract fire service. So while mitigation was $176,000 over expenses, they were $281,579 over in revenue charged to the state. So we actually made about $100,000 off of those services. And I just kind of want to keep pointing that out each year because I do anticipate that to kind of be a roll. That's another thing we might have to look at over multiple years. I do expect there to be years where we don't cover all of our costs, but generally it's made up in years where we do cover our costs. So keep in mind, we're putting $100,000 into the bank this year because they actually made money in that service next year. So we don't have to, if we ever get a year or two to where it's delayed or we've got bigger needs, we are covering it there. And of course, a chunk of that, we did wreck that fire truck.
Yeah. But that's all in the same fund, because that's a fund of its own.
Right. No, it's in the general fund. So they're expensive, it's its own department now.
Yeah, own department.
Yeah.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then we take the revenue into the general fund now to offset their department
Okay,
expenses.
I see. Sorry.
And so that is, like I said, that is performing as we anticipate, and that they're continuing to work through some of those things. So overall, the general fund ended in really good shape. I don't think there's anything but to be happy about that, that we're going into some questionable times with some extra reserves and still operationally very sound. Water, in the water sewer fund, revenue was up 8%, which is $1.1 million over our budget amount. Our expenses were 2.5% below our budget amount, which is $413,000. So when you look at that, we budgeted, if you remember, we budgeted a $3.2 million shortfall in water sewer because we were moving money into the capital fund for the 2 new wells that we're drilling up in the northwest well field. We amended that budget line item and reduced that planned deficit to $2.7 million. And so now we're going to end up with that deficit of $1.5 million. So we've reduced the planned deficit by over half. And so we are still spending $3 million adding those 2 new wells, but our reserves are only going to be impacted by about $1.5 million, which as we continue to go through capital projects, we've got a rate study that will be presented at the November 18th meeting. We're finalizing that now, but based on our usage now, the suggestion for the next 5 years is going to be a reduction in the consumption for residential accounts in next year. But then after that, we'll be looking at some increases in the sewer base rate, but all the other rates will stay the same. So we've got very little change planned coming forward on water and sewer rates over the next 5 years. No change to the industrial district customer water rate for the next 5 years. And of course, some of that is tied to their increased consumption, because if you remember last time we did the rate, they were, you know, it still wasn't quite 75% of the cost, but now they've increased that. We are over collecting a little bit, planned over collecting a little bit, because that increased use is going to continue to drive big capital expenses. And so we are starting to look at water right purchases and stuff in the midterm. And so we're going to be working through some of that stuff going forward. So just as you see that, you know, and I've reminded the council a lot over several meetings, just because we're making money in water and sewer doesn't mean it's there. I mean, it's not necessarily profit, because that's a finite resource that has to be continuously reinvested in.
Yeah.
So overall, water sales were up 11%, Nutrien water sales was up 13%, Phillips 66 water sales were up 11%, and Tokai water sales were up 9%.
But aren't those industrial district contracts ready to be renegotiated?
The industrial district contracts, which go into the general fund, will be renegotiated this coming year.
Oh,
And so I think having stable water rates will give us,
Okay, so, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's two different things, okay.
yeah, they have an industrial water supply
Yeah.
agreement, and they have the industrial district contract.
Okay.
And so, but by having stable water rates planned for the next 5 years, that will put us in a pretty good negotiating point. On the other side, the industrial district contracts offsets are all of our general fund. That's how we offset and support public safety,
Yes.
quality of life, recreation, and all of those things. And so we'll
Okay.
continue to negotiate those. We've had a lot of, I think, improvement with that. They should feel really proud of what their payment is getting their community and their citizens. Then when we talk, I just want to point out a little bit on the hotel occupancy tax. So the hotel occupancy tax fund actually was $189,966 over our budgeted revenue. Now, I will say that 57,000, so Nutrien's paying us $57,000 a year as their donation to the Dome. They had 2 payments hit this budget year just because of how they were catching up. So that number's inflated just a little bit. But even when you take that out, we were $132,000 over our planned budget, and the actual revenue from our hotel occupancy tax was about $80,000 over our planned revenue, so it's well above the 5-year average if you look at those charts. The venue tax collected, the venue fund collected $10,675 over our estimated budget amounts. The Dome, we thought, would bring in about $15,000 in its first partial year, and just the room rental alone, it generated over $18,000 in revenue. And so if you look at Nicole's spreadsheet, it has been embraced quite well, and I'm not for sure that they let her breathe, but if you go by there,
Very busy, that's for sure.
there's something going on out there all the time, so we're excited to see that. A little bit of project update. So we've received our advanced funding agreement from TxDOT on 10th Street. We're still working through the final details of that. But as we go through that, you know, TxDOT is in the process of providing $1 million to support that project, and in turn, the street will come off of the state system, which, like I said, we don't maintain it anyway, or they don't maintain it anyway.
Wow.
So we'll take a little bit with it, but we'll maintain the lights. So we're working through that, but we did get the first little bit of documentation with that hard number, and so the final hard number did come in at a $250 million. So that will offset our cost on that project, which will allow us to put that money into some other street projects going forward. The Dome, we did finally got our brains installed over the last week or so, so it's amazing how nice it is when it functions the way it was supposed to, and I think I'm probably the most relieved because I kind of knew how it was supposed to operate, and so I was a little more frustrated than some, but it's we've had a couple events now there with it fully functional, and it's been
Oh,
it's
good. That's great.
That resolves the changing lights as
no,
well?
the lights is that this week, they're here today, so we're working on but this is the projectors and the screens and the built-in microphones, and
That's good.
it's pretty nice, and it does just, you know, if you remember, we spent we spent a lot of money on AV equipment for that, but we spent it to make it easy so that we don't have to have staff to operate it.
Yes.
And I think, you know, Nicole will agree, if it's pretty easy. Drag and drop and touch and click. I mean,
That's
it's
good.
so much of the programming is handled on the back end that if you want source one on the projector, you just drag it and it takes care of the rest, and that's all you do. You want the microphone on, you turn the microphone on.
Yeah. So it's
That's county
good.
friendly. Thank goodness.
It's so friendly, even Bob could do it.
Well, and we, it's the same system that we put in the police and the fire department, and I joke a little bit about that because when I helped spec that for the police department, I said it's got to be easy enough that a cop can operate it. And so, and I was a cop at that time, so, I was making fun of myself, so, and then, when we put it in the fire station, I was like, well, it's got to be even simpler for the firemen, so, But it definitely improved the operational capacity of the dome, and I think, we haven't had many complaints before, but this just really takes it to another level on what we can do and what you can do in there. We have started the final engineering on our Main Street program, the next grant on Main Street, so the Fair Housing Proclamation you passed again, that we did again today, so we did that back in March. The paper somehow forgot or lost the documentation that it was published, so we couldn't prove it for the grant, so we have to do it again so that we can get proof that we declared Fair Housing Month as part of our CDBG grant funding as part of the federal grant guidelines. And of course, we have done that every year now for 4 years for all the different grants that we have applied for. But we are in final engineering for that, so we expect that project to go out to bid in the next month. If you remember, that project will replace the sidewalks in the 700 block of Main, mostly on the east side, and we've talked about this before, but that's where I even hate to call them sidewalks because there's really not much left. But it'll get railing and improve that significantly. It will redo the ADA ramps at the intersection of 7th and 8th. And then it will also tear down the building at 418 North Main to make way for our pass-through park, which will connect the new parking lot behind on Weatherly Street as we continue our downtown revitalization. We have sent the notice to proceed to Bo Phillips, the contractor that was awarded the Main Street sewer replacement project. So we expect to see that moving forward within the next 60 days or so. Remember, once we issue the notice to proceed, they start ordering stuff, and depending on when stuff gets in will depend on when they actually start working, because there's no point in digging a big hole and then leaving it there for months while you wait on stuff to come in. So that has been given the notice to proceed, and that will connect 4th Street to 1st Street, will include new paving in the alley in the 300 block of Main, behind where the EDC has that land now for possible future public use too. So that is progressing. Like I said, we do have bids out on the roof for City Hall. That should be on your next council meeting, if not maybe the 18th, depending on how long it takes us to review them. The contractors walked the building last week, and so that'll be the first big project for the update on this building. If you recall, we delayed that after we approved a study to make sure that the building had the life expectancy left before we put a $200,000 roof on this building. But we are moving along with that, and Park Hill has started engineering plans for bathroom and sewer, which is part of the budget this year, so they are moving with that. So going through the department's planning developments, definitely had a busier month than normal. They've issued 2 temporary certificates of occupancy for Tractor Supply and HTO, so those are both planning an opening sometime around November 4th. I believe Tractor Supply has already got their hard open set for that. They did complete the inspections for Shoe Sensation and Bell's Outlet, which are both open now. Has anybody been there yet?
Yes,
Just to get my
Wife
teeth
has.
on from my wife.
I've been there.
I haven't yet.
And
Got me some titty runners right here. Just saying. Just saying.
Supporting the local economy.
so
Yes.
when we get our December sales tax payment, we'll see how much you contribute to that. But I do know that, I've heard a lot of feedback over the years that we needed a shoe store, and so I think that's definitely good to be back, and having the Bell's Outlet should give us the other thing I hear is men's clothing. And so that should give us an option there. They're also working on a T-Mobile and H2 Health remodel for construction permits, and they had a meeting on a possible.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
It's the T-Mobile and the H2 Health are remodeling their buildings over there, so they've been working through that. There is a possible fast food type restaurant that's interested that we've started talking about, and so we'll see how that develops. It's nothing that nobody probably really wants, but it will be another option. It's not Taco Villa, and it is not Chick-fil-A.
I need to go make them.
Slater Controls has started building in the Enterprise Park, so that is the first
You
business.
might want to re-say what you just said about it not being something that somebody wants. Just kidding.
I said it would be another option, which is
Okay,
always
another
good,
option.
but there's, anytime
just
I
not
ask, nobody
Taco
cares
Bell.
about anything other than Taco Villa and Chick-fil-A in this town, for whatever reason that is.
That's true.
Well, that's
Pete
true.
wants steak fingers.
Yeah, he's looking for the Steak Express, is that? And so three buildings at the North Park Apartments have been completed now in their renovation project up there off of Coble. It's been an interesting time with Larry and the different contractors and trying to make sure that they're doing it right, but those buildings, if you go by there, they've turned out, they are improved, and I think, depending on the tenants and how they stay up with them, I do think that that's gonna end up being a positive impact to that area at least a little bit. We're still trying to hire for the alley crew, and that's choosing to, be difficult with anything. And then they've also been inundated with the last of some of the roofing inspections after a hailstorm earlier this year. If you've driven around town, I'm sure you've seen a lot of new roofs going on, so that always adds some temporary work. Human Resources has been working on our open enrollment, so TML will be here Friday to meet with all the employees and provide details on, the changes to our health insurance. And we have gotten the vacation accruals reset in our system to go in line with the resolution the council passed adopting our new vacation policy last meeting. And of course, today in the consent items, we will finalize the approval of the vesting for TMRS, and we'll get all of that changed. The fire department's been pretty busy as well. Both Archie, the hazard mitigation supervisor, and Bob Watson were in the North Hayes County teaching wildfire classes. They had very, very good feedback and want them to come back and teach some more of that. So we're continuing to get our department name out there as the leader in hazard and wildland and hazard mitigation and training. They've also attended the TIFMA Symposium, and we're working through some of that stuff. The Wildland Division has been preparing for the P66 controlled burn around the plant. So we hope to have that done by the end of November, and of course, that is a contract amount that will be paid to us. That contract, I think, is worth a little over $100,000 in our time and effort there. Fire department also participated with a hazmat drill with Phillips 66. They set up and operated the decon tent in their drill, so that's always good that we continue to do those things and be acclimated with our industrial partners. They've also been reinforcing our pre-fire plans. They've been working on 45 to 60 pre-fire plans a month. So, what the crews do is they go out to each of the commercial businesses and they, get kind of draw out floor plans and find out where hazardous materials will store. They keep that in their CAD system so that if they ever get called to a fire there, they've got some information about the building, the business, and the fire hazards before they get there. So we get, that's a big portion of our ISO rating, which they're still working on. That final inspection should happen in November. But we do anticipate maintaining our ISO 2 rating. So that's in the top 15% of all fire departments in the country. And so we are excited about that. They did have 3 officers complete the fire chief's executive leadership training. And then Archie has completed his task book for task force leader and is now able to go out as a task force leader on TIFMAS responses and those mutual aids. And Bob has completed his division supervisor task book. So we're continuing to trickle those down. And then we'll talk a little bit about in the fire marshal's portion, but they supported the open house last week, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. At the police department, we have opened the next recruiting process, so those recruits are testing Saturday. So we have 24 that have been selected for testing. If that goes about like normal, probably get 18 to show up and go through the process, and then they will eventually whittle those down to likely 3 final candidates over the next couple of weeks. The 3 current recruits are getting towards their final phases of field training, but it's kind of funny that we're starting the next round before the first round is out on its own. But we do seem to be having a lot better luck with that, and we are starting to see some stabilization in the police department and the fire department with staffing. So they also had FTO and school-based law enforcement training for officers. And we're getting ready to have a sergeant corporal promotion in the police department following the promotion of Lieutenant Morris, who replaced Lieutenant Watson, who retired last month. Our new animal control officer is in training. So we'll hope to be getting them back out, and of course, they've been dealing, we have a little bit of some building maintenance issues out there, do some water and some cleaning issues, but we're gonna be working through that pretty well. Utilities continues to vacuum the 400 block daily pretty much until we get that replaced. I know they're excited to see that continuing. We're also still waiting on the vacuum truck to come in, and we have no timeline on that. Again, they are finalizing their new test hole locations. If you recall, we did drill 6 test wells to try to find a location for 2 new wells up in the northwest well field, and all 6 test wells were dry. So we're trying to find up there, the water runs in a vein up in there, so, you know, you kind of guess where you think that vein's gonna be, which is why we drilled test holes. But we do have a $350,000 budget for test holes. We did kind of plan that we might have some issues up there, so it's not necessarily unplanned. Of course, we would have liked to hit
On first.
on the first one, but that didn't quite happen. And then the utility crew did work. I know I sent y'all some of the pictures of the well line that, so that was actually that joint was damaged at installation. So they, either
Roll it on.
they rolled it off the trailer too hard, or they grabbed it with a little traco too hard, but they installed it and rotated the damaged section exactly to the bottom so nobody could see it.
Unbelievable.
Considering that was, you know, out of a 12-mile length of transmission line, you know, all in all, it went pretty well. They had that back in service in about 10 hours, and that included finding it. So keep in mind that they knew they had a leak because pressure, you know, the gauges and stuff could tell that they had a leak and the pressure changes. But just because you know you have a leak doesn't tell you where the leak is on a 12-mile transmission line in the middle of the county. So it did take a little bit to follow it, but we're always impressed with the utilities department's work. I know sometimes it's a little inconvenient for people, but they do a good job. And overall, keep in mind that most of our leaks that you see around town, I will just keep iterating this, these are on service lines, not main lines. It's very uncommon for us to have a main line issue.
Yeah, and I would just like to say that I'm very impressed with the communications director for putting that stuff out there so that our citizens can see when different departments are really doing their things for the citizens. So thank you, Deidre.
And I would also kind of keep in mind that while a lot of other regional served cities around here have pretty frequent boil water notices, you know, do any of you remember the last time you got a boil water notice?
I can't remember. Yeah.
It hasn't been that long ago. We had a limited boil water notice when a third-party fiber contractor hit our water main out on Florida, which took out some water on that side of
I
town.
remember that.
But it has been very limited. And so, you know, our water system, I know that we get a lot of kind of heck because they see leaks around town, but, you know, service lines that connect to your house are generally subpar to the main infrastructure. And then our rocky terrain just over time wears them down a little bit. We do replace about 150 water service lines a year, which considering that's, if you take the working days available, 5 days a week, that's about one every other day. And considering that you have to call in a dig test and wait 72 hours before you can do that, you know, there's a lot of coordination to make sure that you're doing them that often. And so they are making pretty good progress with that, but when you've got 5,200 service accounts, 150 a year, but of course, they're not all necessarily leaking, but we do appreciate our utility department
Absolutely.
and all the things that they've been doing a little outside of the normals, vacuuming regularly and working and all of that. Public Works has also been pretty busy. We did finally receive our oil distributor, which is, if you remember, we bought a trailer-mounted oil distributor to help with our street maintenance projects. So there again, that came in at about 362 days after delivery or after order. But so we're excited to kind of see how that starts working. Of course, we got it about the time the weather no longer cooperates to use it, so it'll probably be a nice piece of equipment going in next year. Like I said, they have finally fixed our pothole patcher. That's remember, hot mix and what we feel, you know, it's called hot mix because it's hot. You have to keep it hot.
Yeah.
Which is why we have that specialized truck that goes and gets the hot mix and keeps it warm while you work around town. Well, it broke, so that limits what we can do. We've got some cold mix things that we can do, but that, you know, gets expensive depending on what it is. So we were delayed a little bit on some of our repairs because of that, but they did get it fixed. Like I said, we do have a new one on order, and like a lot of things, at some point, it will be in. Streets and Freddie too have also been working with the appraisal district. Joe Raper with the appraisal district asked me if we could help them install and set a flagpole. He felt a government building needed a flagpole. And I felt the appraisal district a lot of times gets most of the crap and we don't have to deal with it, but yet they serve us. And so sometimes they're often forgotten about. I've thrown a few new things at them over the years with the tiers and some of the other things that we're doing. So I thought it was more than justified to give them a little help. And so we've been working on that. I'm appreciative of Public Works working with them on that. And I know the appraisal district will appreciate that. They're getting ready. They met with Bookhouse yesterday, Thursday. See, I forgot to put when, but they're meeting, the next Bookhouse will start going into Skittles Park with North Hughes Park. So if you remember, we put that Bookhouse in Huber Park and it was pretty well accepted. So they're meeting with them and Phillips, who's kind of adopting some of that as well. And so they'll be putting that into North Hughes here in the next little bit. They've also, Freddie has been helping with emergency management and the repairs to the radar building as part of our project with Pantex as that continues to progress. And they've been helping at Animal Control getting their floors ready for their new coating that they have to meet state standards. So we're definitely proud of all the work that Public Works does to support all the other cities and seeing us as a whole city.
Yes.
So they've also did a little bit of work for the EDC. Well, it's not really the EDC's anymore because it's our street, but we had a little bit of, when that street was put in, Prospect Road, they didn't set erosion control, they didn't plant grass. So the rain's been kind of washing some of the dirt out. So we've got that kind of regraded and reset out, and we planted some grass, which should help take care of that going forward. That road's it's kind of at the top, it's at the top of a second little hill, so the water does a few little funny things there. We've also been pricing some new mobile bleachers. So we've kind of come to the conclusion, we know we need some new bleachers at Agnes Howe. If we get them, to where they're on trailer wheels, we can move them around where they're needed or use them for other things when there aren't sporting events and games. So we've kind of been leaning about going towards more of those mobile trailers, mobile bleachers than just fixed bleachers for everything. So we're looking at that going forward. We've got a contractor that's going to be pouring concrete pads for the disc golf course. So we've been working with that volunteer group to make some more improvements to that.
And we did add a line item for in the budget, and I thought so.
And I don't know if you've been around Huber Park lately, but we did install some new dog waste stations around Huber Park. Winston walked around and did some surveys in Huber Park and found that as a desire. So feedback to those have been pretty good so far. So we're glad that we got to take care of that, and Winston being proactive in that. And we're also looking for a new scale house attendant now at the transfer station after a employment action there. Public engagement, as the mayor's kind of mentioned, has definitely been busy here lately. So she actually just went through the FEMA PIO course and probably is now tired of dealing with public safety PIOs. And so I think she probably enjoys her more general communication duties more now after seeing some of that. But of course, that is a part of that. And so she's been working with us as we've been reaching out to employees and the public for our annual awards to recognize our cities going forward. And she's been really good in that. We are getting really close to having a new website, an updated website pushed out. And so I'll send y'all we got some screenshots to probably be in your weekly update. So again, we're working on trying to make that information simpler and easier to access as we go forward with that. She's also been coordinating with Michelle for the Frank Phillips College Job Fair that's coming up. So we'll have some city booths and out there,
Oh, that's good.
in that way. And we're also starting our United Way campaign, and she's kind of the lead on that, taking over for Marissa and working with Michelle and Human Resources. And if you haven't seen, we do have movies in the park this Saturday. So Hocus Pocus will be in Huber Park. And so we had a pretty good turnout for the first time with that. So, we continue to push those events and those things to do with the community. So we're excited about that. The weather looks like it's going to be pretty good again. So we hope to see everybody out there. There'll be popcorn again, plus, some Halloween little
Bringing glow sticks this time.
Scary stuff?
No, maybe a few little swoopy things, but last time the kids were on us, we didn't have glow sticks.
Oh, yeah, they like the glow sticks.
Somebody was there with glow sticks for themselves, and they thought we were selling them, and thought, okay, that would have been smart.
Yeah.
But, so we got glow sticks this time.
Okay.
So glow sticks and
They do
popcorn,
like
I mean, glow sticks, popcorn, and hocus pocus. That sounds like a pretty family-friendly night to me.
When the Youth Advisory Council did anything at night up there, they love glow sticks.
And so and changes to the Youth Advisory Council are on her list too at some point, so that hasn't completely gone away. But then Deidre's also been working with Recreation and Manny and Isaac for the Johnson Park Youth Center Carnival, which will be a week from Friday at the youth center. So right now, there are 12 trunks that are reserved, in addition to the city trunks, police, fire. The car club will be there that does the coffee and cars, so they'll have a lot of their antique and classic cars set up with their trunks open and candy for the kids too. And then we also have 8 vendors, and she's got all sorts of events set up, including, your traditional cakewalk and things like that. So we've got that other big event, face painting, set up for a week from Friday. And so those are all out on our social media. They're on our website calendar, and they're as the Boomtown Beat goes out and starts going out in your mail this week. We've taken out the project update and added our community event calendar in that section on the back for the next quarter. So the quarterly list of community events is on there as well. And we've also got a new process in place. Here shortly, we'll be debuting a new form where you can submit an event to be put onto our community calendar. And so we're working with the chamber, who will be the ones actually doing kind of the work, but it'll be on our site. So our goal is that calendar that's on the front page, anything and everything that's going on in or around Borger, we want on that calendar. And so that everybody's got one place where they can come see what's going on, instead of having to go to a bunch of different places to see what's going on. So we're excited about that change coming up. So we do have lots of changes coming in public engagement, and I do feel that that's pretty evident to the public, but, I could be biased. But we do have pretty good positive responses from all of that, and I am excited for the movies and the trunk or treat, so that'll be cool. Fire Marshal's also been busy with Fire Prevention Week. So you've probably seen some of his things around businesses around town. Of course, he made a nice, funny jab at the police department, so the police department might have changed the wording on some of them or all of them.
It's called plausible.
However, their antics probably did increase awareness of, the fact that it was Fire Prevention Week. And in regards to Fire Prevention Week, he had Edith, which is our exit drills in the house, the fire safety trailer.
Oh, yeah.
So that's Edith.
Oh, okay.
So Edith was throughout the county during Fire Prevention Week, and over the week, they had 581 people go through Edith and, learn what and how to be safe in your house and do all of that stuff. They also handed out the new activity books, which were received pretty well. And if you remember, we revamped, Jason Pender took over that Project Shield. We were working with the Fire Prevention Council, but we kind of took that in-house so that we would have less restrictions on those funds, on what we could buy and support our own public outreach. And so a lot of the new little items that he was able to buy with those donations were supported this week, including the fancy little clings that were on the walls that the fire department, the police department had fun with. And then, like I said, that all ended with the open house at the fire department. I don't know if any of y'all were able to drop by the open house, but they had a very good turnout there, over 200 people. They had the obstacle course set up for the little kids. They even had a fire extinguisher. You could put out how to use a fire extinguisher and actually put out a fire. So they had a pretty good response with that. And
I know they went to F week at the library.
Yeah,
Where it was an F.
F for
they just-
firefighter, yeah.
Yeah.
That was my last little dot there was
Oh,
the
sorry.
library event.
My grandchild doing it. I'm just, she
No,
knows it.
But we definitely, appreciate the public's involvement in that, and it's nice to get to interact with them in a different environment than sometimes in the emergencies, and I know that both the officers and the firefighters always enjoy that. And emergency management, they do continue to work at the radar site, so we've got all the electrical work done now, so we're just waiting on the equipment to get back. So we should have that radar up and running probably in the next 6 weeks or so, which is part of that cooperation with Pantech, so we're excited to get that done. They're working on the G2 station alerting interface with the new CAD system this week. That was kind of one of the last pieces that we're working on getting transitioned from the new system. 5 of our dispatchers now have their ProQA certifications, which is our protocol software, as we work to meet national standards and provide high-level services in dispatch. The 2 dispatchers that were on during our critical incident also participated in the PD's crisis counseling following that. And so we're glad that all of that was kind of incorporated together. And then IT started our IP phone system pre-planning. If you remember, we approved last year going to a cloud-based IP phone system to kind of make some things easier and more responsive. That gives us backup options when the phones fail and stuff like that. So we hopefully don't have some of those issues like we've had in the past. And then the city secretary and the municipal court, Stella's been busy going through applicants for our court clerk opening. And we did interviews yesterday and today, and one more tomorrow, and we should have that one filled by the end of the week. Areli, her husband got a job down south, and so she actually got hired in Mansfield as a court clerk. So Mansfield is lucked out and gotten a pretty professional, well-trained,
Absolutely.
responsive court clerk. And so, of course, we're always, as much as we hate people to leave, we're always glad, that we can support them and continue their career and being a good candidate for a future opportunity. So we're glad to see that she got hired before she got moved and kind of what she was looking at. So that's where we're at.
All right.
Questions?
Long,
That was a good report. It was good. Good report. Thank you.
I'd like to say one thing. At the TML meeting, I just wanted to give you kudos. Everybody loved what you had to say, and everybody else that I talked with, other meetings we went to, you were so much already advanced above what they were saying.
Yeah.
This is what you need to do. You were already doing it. So I just applaud you.
Yeah, I went and sat in one of the meetings and I'm like, we're already doing this.
Yeah.
It's awesome. So, yeah, kudos.
Kudos or kudos.
And,
agree.
I had several of the council that were in the meeting that you spoke at talk about how you actually, they finally got some clear information, and so it was really nice to hear that too. So you did really good on your presentation as well.
Well, I appreciate it. I tried, it's kind of one of my things, a lot of those TML, you can get some good information, but a lot of it's more about what they did. And, so I definitely wanted to make sure that I had clear tasks and documents and things that they could take and actually, this is what worked for us, but here's how you
Yeah.
can do the same thing.
I just wanted to know I appreciated it. I also appreciated the way that you had the gumption to fire back. That's to put it lightly. He was challenged, he met the challenge, he exceeded the challenge, and he not only stood his ground, he took ground. I'm just saying.
Good job, Garrett.
Well, it's
And Brandon, thank you for taking
the best
care
part of
of
my
us.
job is always reminding people that there is a significant chunk of the state left west of I-35.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we'll move on to the consent items. And if anyone has anything they want to discuss on them, or if not, then we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve consent items 8 through 13.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes. And item 14, consider and take appropriate action on resolution R-023-22 designating authorized representatives to act on behalf of the city in all matter pertaining to the investment of the city's funds with the Texas Local Government Investment Pool, Tex Pool. Mr. Spradlin.
So this is really just some house cleaning that we kind of dropped the ball on following Eddie's transition. And I don't want to say drop the ball, we haven't had a need to yet, but a couple weeks ago, Scott was planning to go out with a shoulder surgery, and we realized he was the only one that was authorized to move money from Tex Pool.
Oh.
And so, and I wasn't all that concerned because Eddie is still on there, and as a part-time employee, I mean, we all, and, that's been the council's and our desire, and, we all know that Eddie's still serving us, and I don't worry about that. But this will add myself and Brandon to the list as well as Scott. And so just kind of we already did that with the bank accounts and all the other stuff that we kind of, signatures and all the stuff we did. This is, like I said, most times our money's just out there sitting in here earning interest, but, so we're just cleaning house, and that just adds the new administration onto those signatories.
All right. Is there any questions or comments? If not, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution R-023-22 designating authorized representatives to act on the behalf of the city in all matters pertaining to the investment of the city's funds with tax pool.
Second.
And all in favor? And it passes. And item 15, consider and take appropriate action to adjourn.
I'm not gonna say that.
I make a motion that we would adjourn.
I'd like to second that one.
All in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank y'all all for
Thank y'all.
coming.
I wasn't gonna say that.
Thank you,
are
Miss.
so
Thank you, Brandon.
It's been a long day. All right, Brandon? Yes, sir. Jeff
Wes, how are you
Maxwell
doing?
contacted you.
Good, good.
I just wanted to give you public recognition for
About,
Cute. They're so cute.
For the most part, you know, everything's on laws, but it's